nothing from Machu Picchu because the Spanish didn't know that Machu Picchu existed.
Right.
So how there were Inca people living out at Machu Picchu. You know what I mean? They would have known that it was there. And if you look at Cusco from Machu Picchu on a map, you would think like, okay, maybe they're so far away. Machu Picchu's off in the Andean Amazon jungle. It's so far away, you know, maybe it was just out there and they were able to live in this haven away from the Spaniards. And that could be true. But the problem is that wasn't far for the Inca because it was recorded at contact that if the emperor of the Inca Empire living in Cusco wanted fish for dinner, he said it in the morning, he would have it by night. And because they had sprinters that would sprint through the mountains.
Bueno, les cuento que para mí es muy interesante siempre el tema de los misterios, cosas que desconocemos, teorías que pueden surgir a través de un descubrimiento. Y en este sentido podemos decir que uno de los países más fascinantes es Perú, porque estamos hablando de culturas milenarias que habitaron esas tierras. Y por eso siempre escucho muchos podcasts donde se habla justamente de las culturas prehispánicas. Hoy quiero compartir con ustedes algunos fragmentos de una entrevista que le hicieron en un podcast al arqueólogo e investigador independiente Luke Caverns, que bueno, estuvo en Perú, él no puede creer lo que existe en ese país y lanzó algunas teorías interesantes, así que hoy vamos a compartir fragmentos de esa entrevista con ustedes.
Now, here's the thing about South America is that I don't know that all South American archaeologists or that most archaeologists would agree with this, but the way that again, I reference him so much, but you know, the way that Dr. Barnhart and I will talk about it is that if you look at it through this lens, that the Inca are standing on top of 4,000 years of continuous history, probably more than that.
Yeah.
Bueno, lo que dijo Luke en este podcast ha generado debate en la comunidad histórica tras presentar una teoría que intenta explicar uno de los mayores misterios de la arqueología andina, el origen de la impresionante arquitectura de piedra del antiguo Perú. Según Caverns, los incas, la civilización que dominaba gran parte de los Andes cuando llegaron los españoles en el siglo XVI, bueno, según él, los incas heredaron miles de años de conocimiento acumulado por culturas anteriores, algo que explicaría la extraordinaria precisión de sus construcciones. Para entender el misterio, Caverns propone mirar la historia del Perú como una continuidad cultural de al menos 4.000 años. En esta línea histórica aparecen algunas de las civilizaciones más antiguas de América, como Caral, considerada una de las ciudades más antiguas del continente, con más de 5.000 años de antigüedad. A esta tradición le siguieron culturas complejas como Chavín de Huántar, además de sociedades posteriores como Nazca, Paracas y Huari. Cada uno aportó conocimientos en ingeniería, agricultura en terrazas, hidráulica y organización social. Y tenemos que decir que uno de los aspectos más fascinantes de la civilización inca es su mampostería de piedra perfectamente encajada, visible en lugares como Sacsayhuamán, Machu Picchu y el templo del Coricancha. Las piedras, algunas de varias toneladas, encajan con tanta precisión que ni siquiera una hoja de papel puede introducirse entre ellas. Además, muchas presentan formas poligonales, complejas, que parecen haber sido talladas con una exactitud sorprendente. Cronistas españoles del siglo XVI ya se preguntaban cómo era posible lograr ese nivel de precisión. El historiador Pedro Cieza de León escribió que los incas cortaban las piedras usando herramientas simples de piedra y metal, apoyándose en sabiduría antigua transmitida por generaciones. Sin embargo, el misterio aumenta en otros lugares como Sacsayhuamán, donde enormes bloques, algunos de más de 100 toneladas, fueron transportados y colocados con precisión milimétrica. Y esta pregunta que plantea Caverns es realmente interesante. ¿De dónde surgió originalmente esa tecnología? Muchos investigadores han señalado similitudes entre la arquitectura inca y la de Tiwanaku, una antigua ciudad situada cerca del lago Titicaca y que floreció hace aproximadamente 1000 años. Pero incluso en Tiwanaku existe un problema similar. La sofisticación arquitectónica aparece de forma repentina, sin un desarrollo previo claramente documentado. En ese contexto, el arqueólogo plantea una hipótesis audaz. ¿Podría haber existido una civilización anterior, posiblemente originada en la Amazonía, que llevó conocimientos arquitectónicos avanzados a los Andes? Existen indicios que respaldan parcialmente esta idea. Por ejemplo, en Chavín de Huántar se han encontrado influencias culturales provenientes de la Amazonía, visibles en la iconografía, la religión y ciertos estilos artísticos. Además, Caverns señala que algunas de las primeras civilizaciones de Sudamérica, como Caral, no utilizaban cerámica, lo que desafía la idea tradicional de que toda civilización avanzada debe dejar restos de cerámica como evidencia.
4,000 years of continuous history from Corral Supe culture to Chavin de Huantar to Nazca, Paracas, this Peruvian or this West Coast Andean culture. It's 4,000 years of history. And basically when the Inca take over, so you have the Wari Empire that tries to take over all of the Andes, and they end up failing. And then the Inca come in right behind them. Like the Wari was kind of laying the foundation for this cultural empire over the Andes. And then, according to the, traditional archaeologists is that Tiwanaku is built sometime around a 1,000 years ago or so. And so the only thing about Tiwanaku is it's kind of the same question there is like, you look at this Inca stonework, well, where did that come from? And it's, a lot of people point to, well, they must have gotten it from Tiwanaku because there's so many similarities. But then at Tiwanaku, there isn't really anything before that.
Yeah, it just shows up.
Yeah, really, it just shows up. And Tiwanaku, some of that architecture, the H blocks and the blocks that have the patterns in it that are multiple levels, it's just, where did that come from? It doesn't matter how far back you push it in time or how you rationalize it. At Tiwanaku, it appears out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And it's not inspired by anything. So the rationale is that the Inca were able to do it because they're standing on top of 4,000 years of Andean history. And
So why is the exact same style in Egypt?
I have no idea.
There's so many different ways to cut stone and build with stone.
Yeah.
The Romans built a lot of stuff with stone, and it doesn't look like this sort of, these clay molds. Mm-hmm. I mean, I understand why people go down the geopolymer route with this, because it literally, that's what it looks like. It looks like it was just molded out of clay.
Yeah, it is really perplexing because, when I dial in and I think about South America, I get it. It's 4,000 years of continuous history, the terracing that they were able to do and the vast empire that they had. And then, you even have Spanish who see some of these guys building just the imperial style stonework that's in Cusco. And then the Spanish, there's a quote from Cieza de Leon in the 1500s, and he says that they're cutting these blocks, and he's talking about the imperial style blocks, and he says they're cutting the blocks using almost nothing more than stone and metal tools and something like unknown generations of ancient wisdom or something like that. That's basically, there's a Spaniard that sees them making that. At the same time, a Spaniard living at the same time also documents them trying to move around some of the blocks at Sacsayhuaman, and they can't do it.
Y escuchen estos datos que a mí me volaron la cabeza. Otra evidencia del extraordinario desarrollo inca es su red de caminos, el Capac Ñam, que conectaba miles de kilómetros a través de montañas, desiertos y selvas. Gracias a esta red y a los corredores conocidos como chasquis, los mensajes y productos podían viajar con una velocidad sorprendente. Según registros históricos, el emperador en Cusco podía ordenar pescado fresco del océano y recibirlo el mismo día, a pesar de que la costa se encontraba a cientos de kilómetros. Bueno, este nivel de organización demuestra que el Imperio Inca fue una de las civilizaciones más eficientes del mundo preindustrial.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of this mystery where it's like, okay, we have reports of people living then saying that they were able to make the blocks, the imperial blocks of Cusco, but they can't move the blocks at Sacsayhuaman. And it's the same culture.
Yeah.
You know, and even if Sacsayhuaman was built 100 years before the Spanish showed up, they wouldn't have lost the ability to move those blocks, you know.
It might be a myth, but like the story is that he's going to move one of these blocks and they start dragging it and it like slips and falls and it kills a bunch of people because it goes down back down where they were dragging it up.
Yeah, it seems like I'm familiar with the same story. One thing I wasn't prepared for when I started buying primary sources on the Inca world was that it's like this deep in Spaniards that were there writing about the Inca world. There's a lot to know.
There's also that
very little of it has to do with the stonework. But.
Yeah, there was one quote, I think, I don't remember where I read this. Maybe Graham referenced it. I think the guy was he was a son of an Incan woman and a Spaniard.
Yes. Yeah.
And he documented a whole bunch of stuff. He was going around trying to collect his heritage or whatever, and he was talking about the stonework at Sacsayhuaman and, you know, saying that like even in his time they don't really know how it was done and that it looks like the work of demons. Like he's like, what man did this, right? It's like, you know, it's
so that's
almost supernatural in aspect.
Yeah, I forget the name because it's this it's a very colonial Spanish name. Yeah. But the book is called Royal Commentaries.
Yeah, that's it. Royal Commentaries.
The Incas or Royal Commentaries of the Conquest of the Incas. It's something like that. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. And so I'm now at this point where I think, you know, you read Cieza de Leon and his account of them making the blocks at the Coricancha or around Cusco, and you say, okay, there's a guy saying that they're making the imperial style stone. Yeah. There's also accounts of them trying to move the blocks at Sacsayhuaman, and they can't do it.
They can't do it.
And then we have nothing from Machu Picchu because the Spanish didn't know that Machu Picchu existed.
Right.
So how there were Inca people living out at Machu Picchu. You know what I mean? They would have known that it was there. And if you look at Cusco from Machu Picchu on a map, you would think like, okay, maybe they're so far away. Machu Picchu's off in the Andean Amazon jungle. It's so far away, you know, maybe it was just out there and they were able to live in this haven away from the Spaniards. And that could be true. But the problem is that wasn't far for the Inca because it was recorded at contact that if the emperor of the Inca Empire living in Cusco wanted fish for dinner, he said it in the morning, he would have it by night. And because they had sprinters that would sprint through the mountains.
Qué gran misterio, ¿verdad? Y es que a pesar de décadas de investigaciones arqueológicas, el origen exacto de ciertas técnicas de construcción en piedra en los Andes sigue siendo objeto de debate. Para Caverns, el misterio no resta valor a la historia conocida del Perú, sino que la hace aún más fascinante. Él dice, cuanto más estudiamos el pasado andino, más nos damos cuenta de que todavía hay capítulos completos de la historia que no hemos descubierto. Y en un país como Perú, donde cada año aparecen nuevos hallazgos arqueológicos, esa posibilidad sigue muy viva.